Renaissance art. The purpose of art during the Middle Ages was to teach religion. As many people living in medieval times could neither read nor write, paintings and sculptures served as vehicles through which religious leaders could promote spirituality and devotion to God. Medieval artists were less concerned with creating lifelike figures and forms than they were with conveying religious morals and meaning. The Renaissance artists, however, viewed art as a venue of personal and aesthetic expression, and were most interested in secular themes. They wanted to portray the world as it was. Their intent was not only to achieve accurate appearances and proportions, but also to celebrate nature and humanity. Renaissance artists, therefore, often endowed their subjects with beauty and dignity that exceeded reality. The first known artist to realistically illustrate the natural world was the Italian painter Giotto. Giotto was commissioned by churches in Florence, Padua, and Assisi in the early 1300s to recreate biblical scenes. He painted elaborate frescoes, or paintings, on wet plaster. His frescoes depicted realistic settings and strong human emotions. His work preceded some of the most famous architects, painters, and sculptors working in Florence in the early 1400s. In 1429, the Florentine architect Filippo Brunelleschi designed the famous Pazzi Chapel. He used principles of symmetry and geometric beauty. Much of his inspiration came from the styles of architecture employed by the ancient Romans, such as the use of arches and columns. Brunelleschi's work began the revival of classical antiquity. Classical antiquity refers to the ancient culture of Greek and Rome, as it was idealized by the scholars and artists of the Renaissance. The Renaissance artists of the 15th century worked primarily with religious themes, yet the subjects they painted or sculpted were strikingly human. Masaccio was the first of the Renaissance painters to enhance a sense of reality by using scientific perspective to create an illusion of space and depth on a flat surface. His masterpiece was a series displayed in the Brancacci Chapel of the Church of Santa Maria del Carmine in Florence. The frescoes depict biblical characters whose intense gestures and emotions are grounded in realistic scenes. The sculptor Donatello, working in Florence around the same time as Masaccio, similarly humanized biblical characters. He focused on the form of the human body, using dramatic details to convey a dignified human presence. Around 1430, Donatello was commissioned by the Florentine patron of art, Cosimo de' Medici, to cast a bronze statue of the biblical hero David. Donatello's finished David stood 5 feet tall, with the youthful grace and pride of a boy who had just slain the giant Goliath. Donatello's masterpiece was the first major work of Renaissance sculpture. Around the turn of the century, the painters Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo da Vinci emerged as the dominant artists of the late Renaissance. Michelangelo distinguished himself not only in painting but also in poetry, architecture, and sculpture. Like Donatello, he mastered the human form with anatomical and emotional perfection. His famous statue of Moses, for example, which he created in 1516, powerfully portrays the physical and spiritual strength of the Israelite leader. Like Donatello, Michelangelo also sculpted a statue of David, which also became one of the most famous works of Renaissance art. Michelangelo is most esteemed for the biblical frescoes he painted on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Unlike the dramatic scenes of Michelangelo's paintings, Raphael's work was gracefully poetic in its use of soft lines and delicate colors. Raphael painted mainly portraits, including that of the Virgin Mary. His greatest work, however, was the fresco School of Athens. The painting was influenced by classic Greek and Roman models. It portrays the great philosophers and scientists of classical antiquity. Perhaps the 2 most famous works of Renaissance art are Leonardo da Vinci's fresco The Last Supper and his portrait of Mona Lisa. Da Vinci is widely considered to be one of the greatest painters in human history. He studied the workings of the human body with intense dedication. He made thousands of drawings of skeletons and muscles in the pursuit of exquisite accuracy. Da Vinci has become a symbol of the Renaissance movement for his insatiable curiosity and intellectual mind. Although the artists of the Renaissance contributed greatly to the changing styles and ideas, only Da Vinci mastered them all.